Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
Hello, hello. How are you guys doing? That reminds me. Need to remember to look up these lyrics. So, long time no see. Probably not, hopefully. It's like I feel like I'm in like a triple Karen time warp because like simultaneously I'm like watching the current week of the trial and like editing the previous week of the trial and then getting ready for a recap of the previous week of the trial. It's kind of insane. So I hope you guys have had a great, lovely, beautiful day. Hi, DSN. I'm happy to see you. By the way, Fender gave you a wonderful shout out on the live stream this morning. Actually, hopefully you saw that. I can't remember what the circumstance was, but we were talking about how like somebody in the chat would know something specific. And then Fender was like, DSN would know. It was great. I haven't done timestamps yet, but I don't know if you heard that. And Fender, I think, should be here as well. Maybe she'll remember what it was. Shout out to Super Planner Girl. Hello, my friends. I know like Fender's was like, yeah, I'm going to go take like a 4-hour, or I'm going to go sleep for like 4 hours and then come back and for the next one. It's really funny because like Fender, you know, she joined us when we were doing the McCabe's on the recaps. It was like during either Meerkat or Jen. And like, I don't know if y'all remember, like she had never even heard of this trial. And she jumped into the recaps and also simultaneously went back to the very beginning of the trial and caught up on the entire thing. And I applaud her for doing that. It's not easy to do. And also keep up with the recaps and get caught up like that quickly. It's really impressive. Yeah, so that sounds like that might have been a little bit grueling. DSN. I don't blame you for not catching it. I do recall that I verbally said shout out to DSN. I did your command. I don't think I played the Murdoch sound clip, so you could have missed it. But whenever I do the timestamps, I will timestamp it. Hey, Candace, do you remember what the shout out for DSN today was? Were you there when that happened? When there was something that we were like, somebody would know in the chat and we were like DSN, actually Fender was like DSN would know. And then we did a big shout out to DSN. And I don't know if you heard that. So Fender will remember. Oh, that rhymes. I would think. And she should be here also. But also we got another song going today. We had all the small things because that worked out for a lot of reasons. Yeah. It's understandable. There's a lot happening. My brain. There were so many moments today where I was like talking about, I'm like, yeah, this thing that happened last week, or was that yesterday? Or was that 5 days ago? Or was that today? It's like, I don't know anymore. That's okay. That's okay. That's why we timestamp it specifically for the rewatch crew. Totally okay. Not to mention today we're going to be doing week 5, so it's all good. I hope you're having a good project and you're not relegated to an assignment the way that Lally was relegated to his assignment currently. Like, yeah, we'll put our worst man on it. Let's just throw Lally at it. Yay. I'm losing patience for him. He's going to have to get worse at his terribleness in order to make me laugh more, so I stop getting mad about the gross miscarriage of justice that's happening right now. You know, Candace, I just have to say something. I have to pause the music for this. Here's what this will tell you something right here, guys. My brain saw this comment from Candace and automatically I inserted an any. Automatically, my brain read that as what if any? He's their best. Boy, that doesn't tell you something right there. I don't know if I should be laughing or crying. Guys, what do I do? Well, that's good news. I'm very happy about that. So, Kitsmits is so funny. What was it the other night? Fuck if I know. A week ago or something. She said she was like, we must laugh ere we cry. Y'all, speaking of which, did you guys watch the interviews with the Daybell? My God, Chad Daybell jurors. There's been so many of them. They're like, it's really great. I applaud them for being so willing and open to speak up, but there were a lot of really incredible moments from them in their interviews, but one of them was when they were talking about that. They were saying they had to make jokes and laugh a lot. This is something that we can all relate to, right? And they were like, we had to laugh because otherwise it's just too much and stuff like that. And it was the part that I'm referring to with that was when it was like the group interview. Yeah, the younger guy was good. Actually, Juror 14 was probably some of my favorite testimony or my God, interview. But the group interview with Nate Eaton was the one where they were talking about how they kind of got through it as a group. And boy, that's when you really could see how it was a really, really, really impressive because they understood him. Like, it was crazy. They didn't miss a beat. They caught all of it. One of them even said that they thought I couldn't believe it when they said it. They were like, it seemed like he almost wanted the death penalty. And I was like, oh my God, how did they caught up like this, they figured the whole thing out. They figured out all of it. It was really impressive. But one of the other things was how they were talking about how they coped with everything. And they said that they just would come back there and they would just laugh and make jokes. And they were like, we had to. And I'm like, yep, we can relate to that, But another thing that stood out, I don't know if did anyone catch the interview with Juror 14? With Nate Eaton and Juror 14. So there was something interesting there that I was hoping I would see somebody in LawTube comment on because I'll comment on it, but like it's not going to help anything. So, but it was a bit, I don't know. It was like, because we learned a lot with like Miss Becky and all that, like about with what the bailiffs can and can't say to the jury, right? And I don't know if you guys remember, but at the very beginning of all the Miss Becky shit, before we really knew much, right? Back when it was just like little baby allegations or whatever, and it was sort of like people like the attorneys, right, and on LawTube and stuff were like, kind of commenting as if to say like best case scenario, if like the most minimal innocuous thing that she's been accused of is true, like how big of a deal is that, right? I don't know if y'all remember that, but like they were saying that, and they actually gave examples. I think EDB did, and so did Larry, but probably others too. But like specific examples of like how if you're the bailiff and you even say something like, yeah, there's going to be some graphic photos coming up or difficult photos coming up or whatever. If you mention anything like that, because we know with Miss Becky it was that he was going to be taking a stand, right? Like even if she didn't say anything like, don't listen to him or don't trust him or whatever, even if she just said, yeah, he's going to be taking a stand on Monday, for example, right? Like that's already bad. That's already bad. You can't say that. And like they gave an example with photos. Like if they said that even though it might seem like you should be able to say, yeah, there's going to be graphic photos, and most people would think that's a normal thing to warn the jurors, like all the attorneys were clarifying, like, you cannot say that. They can't get a heads up. I guess maybe if the judge, but see, they're never going to say something like that because they know they can't. So, do y'all remember that at all? But, so it was interesting because with Juror 14, in his interview, it was beautiful how he spoke of the bailiffs, and it was a very emotional interview with the connections he made with the other jurors and the bailiffs, and it was really heartbreaking. It was like he misses them so much, and he was like, here's what it's like to see the best of humanity and the worst of humanity at the same time. And another thing I thought that was interesting about him was that he actually served on a grand jury for like 9 months or something like that, like a number of years ago. And so he talked a little bit about that, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And he was like, I would, and when they asked him, like, would you do it again? And if they asked you, like, to be a juror again, like, would you do this all over again? He was like, in a heartbeat. Really amazing stuff. But he was talking about the bailiffs and how much everybody loved the bailiffs and how great they were. And, but I had a little bit of a nervousness bit when he was talking about the bailiffs, and he was saying how, he was giving examples of how great they were. And he said, on Friday, I don't know which Friday, but a Friday, on one of the Fridays, right, when they were going to be doing the pictures of the kids and stuff on, I guess it was a Monday, he said specifically, that on the Friday, right before, the bailiffs said to the jurors, that there's going to be some difficult photos coming up on Monday, something along those lines. I remember him using the word photos and difficult, and it was like in reference to crime scene photos of the kids. And he said, and it was like really great because they were able to take the weekend to kind of prepare for that mentally. And I was like, oh boy, because if anybody is paying attention, like that, like Chad's attorney, that might be not good, because that is overstepping. And God forbid we have to go through another whole thing about this in Idaho. But yeah, if you guys listen to the interview, you'll hear it. Because I know y'all all have followed everything with Murdoch, and you guys will know what I'm referring to. So if you listen to that interview with Juror 14, you'll hear that part that I'm talking about. And I'm really curious what you guys think. But in my mind, like, I was not expecting that, obviously, but he said it, and I was like, uh-oh, because from everything that we know with Miss Becky, because there was a long period of speculation there, right, before we knew anything. There was like a period of months where it was like, this can't be true. Let's let's weigh all the different situations and stuff like that. And anyway, that was like the best case scenario, was that she just referenced the evidence. And in this case, it was Alec Murdoch's testimony, right? Or in that case, rather. But they were like, that's still enough, though. That's still not good, even if they just reference it. And so anyway, I don't know. But the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the very first document to come out of Idaho for Chad Daybell since his verdict and sentencing. Wow.
It's a house.
Sorry, I don't know why. What is... Oh, I haven't added my screen. That's why. Okay. So... Okay, hold on. I've got the document pulled up. I just need to present my screen. Here we go. Add a stage. All right, cool. So this is the very first document to come out of Idaho for Chad. So this was just filed on June 1st. It's short, but here's the update, you guys. I don't think anybody's covered. It's not that there's a whole lot, but just this is, in my mind, even though this isn't a long doc, it's a big deal because it's the first thing. Like the most recent thing we have prior to this document is in relation to that attorney that came in and tried to fuck everything up. That was weeks ago. So this really is kind of a big deal because it's the first document since then. And when that whole thing happened with that attorney, that was like beginning a trial still. Alrighty, so here we go. In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Fremont, State of Idaho plaintiff was Chad Daybell, defendant. Upon the return of a verdict finding the defendant guilty of charges in the amended indictment, and now having been sentenced to the death penalty by a jury and from this court, the court enters the following order. The Ada County Sheriff shall immediately transport the above named defendant from the Ada County Jail to the Idaho Department of Corrections. And then this is kind of epic, right? It is so ordered. That's like pretty epic right there. And there's Judge Boyce's signature. Has a little bit of a similar vibe to Judge, I feel like, with the way that it slants and also the sizing of it. And then here's the certificate of service. And as you can see, we've got Lindsay Blake, Rob Wood, and John Pryor. That's a nice signature. Gosh, y'all, if y'all saw my signature, you guys would, I don't even know what. It's a mess. It's not, it doesn't look like words. So that's it. That's the newest document for Chad. But it's a big deal, right? Like, here we go. It's the beginning of the end for him, right? He's going to be transferred over. It'll be interesting to see what happens, right? Like if any reality will ever sink in for him. What do you guys think? So that's that. That's the, why do I have two tabs over that? So that is the newest document there. And yeah, so let me get rid of this real quick here. Okay, so. Okay, so next on the docket, I wanted to show y'all something funny from not today live, but Monday live court. So when I was watching it, and there was a moment, so I was watching it live, right? And then yesterday in the afternoon, I was catching up on some of EDB's coverage, which I'm trying to think. The scheduling was weird because she was like out of town and stuff. So anyway, I think she was covering it yesterday, but I was catching up on it and I was like, holy shit, because there was a moment where it was like the same part of the testimony. And she said something and I remembered it being like almost exactly what I said. And so I thought it was really funny. So I made it just, this is very short, but it's just a little clip of us like side by side because of the similarity is pretty funny. So we're going to watch that real quick. It's about the chain of custody report.
Approach, it's time to approach. Just take a glance at.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document? The second document that I just handed you.
This is a printed chain of custody report from our laboratory information management system.
Dear.
Your Honor, with the court permission, I'd like to mark the.
You know what's so crazy? In all the other trials, these types of things come in from the prosecution or the state because they're happy to prove the chain of custody, right? Like, remember with Murdoch, they did that exhaustively, but they showed the chain of custody all the way through for every single item, no matter how long it took, how boring it was. They did the whole thing. And here, only in this trial does that come out only from direct, like, or only on cross. Like, never on direct do we get the shit like this that you should normally be having. Here it is on cross. So you know what this means? There's going to be some fucked up thing coming out here. You know.
First document's name again. I want to get it right.
Oh, you did.
Evidence submission form for submission 7.
Gotcha. Okay.
Evidence submission form for submission 7, 2-page document. If I could have that next in order.
Yeah, she's on here probation.
Chain of custody. I apologize.
Is there an objection, Mr. Lally?
Yes, to both.
Yeah, I bet.
Unless you want to convince me otherwise.
I'll have a mark for ID for
Okay.
the time being. That's fine. If that's okay with the court.
Yes.
The court says it's okay to mark it for ID. I'm just going to narrate everything in song to save myself from going insane over this case. A feeble attempt, but yet we will try.
What is that document?
So again, that was my reaction, my immediate instinct reaction to the defense entering the chain of custody into evidence. Like, what is happening? We are in beyond Twilight Zone. The defense was entering, and it was shocking to me. And then I was actually driving, listening to EDB, and I was like, oh my God, whoa. She said
The second document that I just handed you.
This is a printed chain of custody report from our laboratory information management system.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to mark the first document's name again. I want to get it right.
It's the evidence submission form for submission 7.
Evidence submission form for submission 7.
I rarely see the defense having to admit the chain of custody log.
Yeah.
Normally that comes in with the case in chief. I've only seen these with the lead investigator who did the chain of custody. Because right now those documents have a whole bunch of hearsay on them. I've never seen the defense submit them. What is happening?
Yep. Valid question. Yep. So there it is. So it was just funny. It's funny because so now, like with what's going on, there's times where I'm actually streaming it and getting to certain parts before like EDB is, right? And so it's really funny when I'm going back and listening after the fact and I'm like, oh, like, you know, she's saying what I said, right? Because like it's like you can imagine it being the other way around, but like I don't know, it's just funny. It's like it's a funny moment when I'm like, oh wow, like, you know, I do know something. You know, like, so anyway. Okay, but we're gonna go ahead, let's jump right on in here to the week 5 recap. And I apologize in advance. It's going to say week 4 recap. Just ignore that. It's supposed to say week 5.
It's a house.
Yes, indeed. Just swap 4 with 5. This is week 5, guys. Sorry about that. The date is correct, though.
And where is it that you work now?
My current employer is South Shore Health.
This feels like a lifetime ago.
How
Wow.
long have you been working for South Shore Health?
I started there in October of this past year, 2023.
And where did you work prior to that?
Before that, I had been at full-time at Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And how long was it that you worked at Good Samaritan?
Let's see. I started at Good Samaritan in 2010.
Now, sir, if I could, I'd like to just talk a little bit about your
Y'all,
educational background.
this was really special. Let's watch this again. This was so special. I remember Fender was watching this with me, and she's actually a psychologist. And I think she was probably having kittens, as they say, over the different problems.
How long
with
was it that you worked at Good Samaritan?
Let's see. I started at Good Samaritan in 2010.
Right here.
Now, sir, if I could,
Like he answers it, and then he's like, after the fact, he's like, hold on, let me do the math and make sure. And then Lally interrupts him with some stupid question that probably makes no
I'd
sense.
like to just talk a little bit about your educational background. Where did you go to school as far as your undergrad was concerned?
I went to undergraduate at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia.
And what, if any, degrees did you graduate from there?
I mean, what if any degrees? Nope, I don't. Like, what if someone just to fuck with him should answer questions the way he deserves? Like, nope, I didn't get any degrees, but yet here I am, an ER doctor. I have no degrees, and I'm an ER doctor just to fuck with them. You know what I mean? For the question being stupid.
I obtained a bachelor's of science in chemistry.
And following your graduation from there, where did you go to school after that?
So after that, I attended University of Virginia for medical school. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry.
And as far as the morning, what I'm going to turn your attention to is the morning of January 29th, 2022.
This
Were you
dude
working at
has
Good
a
Samaritan
harder
that
time
day?
than most making sense of Wally's question.
If that's the morning of this incident, then yes.
Again,
And
I've referenced. My fucking god, I can't help it. The Lally poison. The Lally poison. I'm not going to use the word referenced. I've said this actually several times about how every single person calls this an incident. It is so fascinating. Everybody, the defense attorneys, the prosecution, law enforcement, medical staff, everybody refers to this as the incident and not the death, the homicide, the accident, whatever. As everybody calls it, it's like, it's really interesting. It's like no one wants to know what, no one knows what to call it or something, right? Like it makes sense for the defense to be calling it an incident, because it would make sense that they don't want to call it a homicide or whatever because of their theory of the case. It is odd to me, though, that the state and law enforcement are calling it an incident, because that the language is, you never hear about this, guys. Like in every trial we've ever seen, they're like the night of the murders, the night of the death, the night of the homicide, the night of the accident, the night of the shooting, the night of the stabbing, whatever the case may be. I've never in my life heard anything like this. It's so bizarre.
Is there a particular shift, or what kind of hours would you be working around that time at Good Samaritan?
Just ask
I'm
him.
pretty sure I started my shift at 6 a.m. that day. There was a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. It was either 2 or 3 to, excuse me. It was either 6 to 2 or 6 to 3 p.m., but the shift would have started at 6 a.m. as I recall.
Wow.
And
That-
on that date at Good Samaritan, do you recall becoming involved with a treatment of a patient by the name of John O'Keefe?
Yes.
Obviously he does.
Dr. Rice, with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, about what time did he come into your facility at Good Samaritan?
Would you like me to look at the chart here? Let's see.
If you can't remember things and you need to reference the
All right,
chart, you
let's-
can do that, doctor.
Okay, thanks.
So that is insane. I commented on this at the time. I'm going to comment on it again. I don't know what's happening. This is not an expert witness. Okay, let's review briefly. We talked at length about this topic when it came to Murdoch, right? And how it goes with experts. So there's a lot of differences between expert witnesses and lay witnesses, but for the purpose of this discussion, expert witnesses, like when it comes to notes, right? Expert witnesses can rely on, well, okay, they can, first of all, they can make opinions, right? They can rely on their opinions. They can actually like speculate certain information, and they can use their notes. However, they can't just read from their notes. And for a great example, look no further than Debbie Heard, where Dr. Hughes is infamous for that. And it became like a joke, a running joke of the trial. So they can reference their notes, and that's the term they use. That's not me being a lolly. That's the term that they use. They can refer to their notes, but they cannot read from their notes. And that only happens when like they ask, like when the witness asks, and it's like a whole to do. There's like a whole thing about it, right? And like then the whole thing about they can look at their notes, refresh their recollection, and then they have to like put their notes away and then continue testifying from memory after having their recollection refreshed from the notes. This, I don't know what this is. Because he's not okay. He's not a lay witness, right? I mean, he's a treating physician. He's not an expert witness, but he's got notes, and she's just like, here, have at ye. Go ahead and read from them to your heart's delight. Like, what? What? Well, wait. Let's listen again. This is, to me, this is like anarchy. This is pure insanity. This is like a free-for-all, like a feeding frenzy. Like, what are we doing?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Rice, with regard to Mr. O'Keefe, about what time did he come into your facility at Good Samaritan?
Would you like me to look at the chart here? Let's see.
If you can't remember things and you need to reference the chart, you can do that, doctor.
Okay, thanks.
I don't
So it looks
understand
like, based on
happening. I don't understand what's happening. And yeah. But having said that, everything in this trial is opposite of normal, so maybe that's
the
why.
code sheet, first line starting at 0647, so I'll say 6:47 a.m.
And as far as his presentation, Mr. O'Keefe's presentation, when he came into the emergency department, how would you describe his presentation upon his arrival there?
So he would have been, he was unresponsive and intubated, as in with a breathing tube into his airway via his mouth.
And as he came into the emergency department, what, if anything, was fixed to him in regard to CPR or other resuscitative efforts?
So he would have had CPR in progress. And also someone would have been ventilating his lungs via the endotracheal tube.
Now, there's mention within that record as far as a cardiac arrest. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're asking me.
Sure. Well, let me just ask you, familiar with the term cardiac arrest?
Yes.
Can you describe to the jury, based on your training and experience, what your understanding of that term is?
Sure. So, as in he arrived with in cardiac arrest, which by definition means that his heart was not autonomously or independently pumping blood, or in his case, without electrical activity as well of the heart.
Can you use the term in there as far as asystole? Could you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
Sure. So, asystole would be
Oh, there
when
it
you
is
put
again.
the electrical leads on a patient's heart.
There it is again. Lally's back to saying, "Hey, systole." Oh my God, did y'all hear that? Even though he's been corrected on that a lot of times so far.
Systole would be
Hold on.
when you put the electric.
Could you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
Sure. So,
Lally.
pumping blood, or in his case, without electrical activity as well of the heart.
Can you use the term in there as far as asystole? Could you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
Sure. So,
You went to high school with this guy, DSN, who's on the stand, Dr. Justin, whatever, Rice, I think his last name is. Did you go to high school with him? Oh. Yeah, I mean, Lally.
year 2023.
And where did you work prior to that?
Before that, I had been full time at Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And how long was it that you worked at Good Samaritan?
Let's see. I started at Good Samaritan in 2010.
Now, sir, if I could
Again,
like
with
to
the
just talk a
counting,
little bit
that is
about
so
your
fucking funny.
educational background. Where did you go to school as far as your undergrad was concerned?
I went to undergraduate at the College of William and
Oh,
Mary.
weird. What happened? Somehow it rewound itself more. Rewinded. What? That's funny because we heard the asystole again, and now it went backwards. Weird. Let's go to where we were.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't understand what you're asking me.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
let me just ask you, familiar with the term cardiac arrest?
Yes.
Can you
Okay.
describe to the jury, based on your
This
training?
is about where we
Means
were.
that his heart was
Here
not
we go. Perfect.
autonomously or independently pumping blood, or in his
Struggles
case,
real, y'all. Struggles
without
real.
electrical activity as
My
well of the
God.
heart.
Can you use the term in there as far as asystole?
Guys, all I can say is mine heart struggles through listening to Lally.
Explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean.
I'm
Sure.
gonna
So,
hey, systole.
asystole would be when you
Can I capture it? Like as in the sound where he's saying, hey, systole, that part, you mean? Yeah, you know what? That's brilliant. Absolutely. Of course I can. Of course I can. In fact, I'll do it right now before I forget, because also we get to hear it again. So let me rewind it. Yeah. Or well, yeah, no, that's fine. Let me see where we are here, and then I can go back. Yeah. I don't know what you're asking me is you're right. We need that. Great thinking. Great thinking. Let's find that part.
obtained a bachelor's of science in chemistry.
And following your graduation from there, where did you go to school after that?
So after that, I attended University of Virginia for medical school. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry.
And as far as the morning, what I'm going to turn your attention to is the morning of
there's another
January
one.
29th, 2022. Were you working at the Good Samaritan on that day?
If that's the morning of this
I think there's
incident,
another
then
one.
yes.
And is there
No.
a particular shift, or what kind of hours would you be working around that time?
There's like so much confusion.
I'm pretty sure I started my shift at 6 a.m. that day. There was a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Actually, there
It
might
was
have
either
been
2
one.
or 3 to, excuse me.
Oh
It's
my
either
God.
6.
I think there's one earlier. Let's see.
I'd like to just talk a little bit about your educational background.
Okay.
Where did you go to school as far as your undergrad was concerned?
I went to undergraduate at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia.
And what, if any, degrees did you graduate from there?
I obtained a bachelor's of science in chemistry.
And following your graduation from there, where did you go to school after that?
So after that, I attended University of Virginia for medical school. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry.
As far as the morning, what I'm going to turn your attention to is the
I
morning of
was right though.
January
There were two
29th,
of them. Hold on, let me go back.
2022. Were you
I
working
laughed fucking through it.
from there? Where did you go to school?
Oh my god.
So after that, I attended University of Virginia for medical school. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry.
And as far as the morning, what I'm going to turn your attention to is the morning of January 29th, 2022. Were you working?
There are two. There's another one.
Is there a particular shift, or what kind of hours would you
That
be?
is so funny. So there are two of them. There's, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking me. And then he says another version of that right after the fact, but I got both of them. So I'll put them both in one clip. Thank you for the idea, DSN. That was brilliant, as per usual. Now I'll just jump to where we were.
Systole would be when you put the electrical leads on a patient's heart.
I don't think I'm smart enough to understand this, DSN.
The complete absence of intrinsic electrical activity from the heart would be asystole. So as in not having any observable or detectable electrical activity would be asystole.
Now, as far
I
as
just
these
shortened that. He struggled
conditions,
with
as
a lot
far as
longer on
cardiac
that.
arrest and
No, I-
asystole, what, if any, concerns does that raise from a diagnostic perspective in relation to Mr. O'Keefe?
I guess your question with respect to it from a diagnostic perspective, I don't know exactly what you're asking me there.
Oh my God, another
Let me
one.
rephrase that. So,
Y'all, another one. It's a miracle. Okay, let me get that one too. Hold on, let me go back a little bit. I'm going to capture that as well. Amazing. So I did that on like I remember when I was editing this, I made sure to try to leave any of those in because there's so many. So let me get that as well. Add it to our collection. Amazing.
I guess your question with respect to it from a diagnostic perspective, I don't know exactly what you're asking me there.
let me rephrase that. So,
Wow.
with regard to those conditions that are observed and noted within the
Well
medical
said,
chart
well
from Mr.
said,
O'Keefe
well
that
said.
you have before you, how would that
He doesn't
relate
know what he's
to
asking me either, so.
his condition or sort of how he's presenting and what if anything you're doing?
I'm Lally. What about me?
Well, so even with good CPR, the perfusion of the brain, for example, and this is what I think about frequently during
Good point.
resuscitative efforts like this,
I mean,
as in
it's troublesome though, because also I remember thinking to myself, is he like drunk? Is he drunk? Like, is he hungover? Is he drunk? And then I heard a couple other people kind of say something similar. And oh man, I hope not.
I couldn't tell you an exact time, but
Although
there's
having
a certain
said that, as we know, seems like they aren't really tough on drunk driving around there. So
without perfusion of the brain for a certain amount of time,
I don't even know what he's talking
you're
about.
limited with respect to, well, the concern is that the patient, even if you resuscitate their body, that there's potentially going to be brain death or anoxia or lack of oxygen to the brain and a poor outcome with respect to neurological outcome.
Now, in addition to the cardiac arrest and the asystole, as far as Mr. O'Keefe was concerned, what if any presentation did he have related to hypothermia?
So I know his initial temperature was low. I'd have to,
Nice,
I was going to
Candace.
say I'd have to look, but I can see here that the nursing wrote in their notes that
What
his,
the hell's happening?
I see
Why are
T
you
equals 80.1 R. So I interpret that to be his temperature was 80.1 degrees by rectal temperature.
And as far as
corner armpits?
resuscitative efforts as they pertain to the core body temperature or the low core body temperature of Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, was done with relation to treatment of that?
Sure. So as the nursing note mentioned,
So I think what he's going to say here is that they one of the things they did for treatment was they went and they got a bear and they had a bear give him a big, nice, friendly hug.
and there's a bear hugger was applied. So that's a blanket that has warmed air being pumped through it. So that's a way of externally warming someone. He also, having reviewed the chart earlier, I don't see it right in front of me. Actually, I take that back. He had warm IV fluids running, so IV fluids not at room temperature, as in a worm or an oven of sorts, would have been
Disaster.
given to him via intravenous or central venous access.
And as far as body temperature is concerned, what if
What a mess.
what if any relationship does the body temperature have and the warming process have as to a declaration of deceased in relation to Mr. O'Keefe?
Now this
Well,
is
so
important.
there's
We have to try to figure out what the fuck they're saying.
there's a goal in resuscitative medicine to
So, okay, pause real quick. This is actually important. We're going to try to figure out what the fuck they're saying because we don't, this is for anyone who remembers, this was, what the fuck is happening? Oh my God, sorry. My mouse is like possessed by a demon right now and is like connecting and disconnecting and I don't know what's happening. Stop doing that. Oh my God. I don't know how to make it not do that. Hold on. Sorry. Let me pull this Bluetooth thingy out. I dropped it. Everything's happening. So, all right. So this was the first time in this trial so far that we'd heard anything that proved that John O'Keefe was dead. Finally, right? This was witness number 46. And we finally heard somebody say that John O'Keefe was dead. So that's a step in the right direction, I guess. Candace says now she wants a cannoli. And so, but the other thing is like, we're hearing it in this context where we've got like, this dude is like, as if Lally, like if Lally was an ER doctor on the stand, this is what Lally would be. I feel like there's two Lollies right now. It's like a double lollipop. Ew. And it's a disaster. And so it's really hard to make heads or tails of what the fuck is happening. But this testimony is really important about the victim being deceased. And also, I remember, I think there was somebody who was asking me questions about this because it actually does matter in terms of with hypothermia. There's the different protocol of where they have to warm you first. So there's a question of when was he actually deceased? Because when he might have been declared deceased or whatever, officially, he might have actually been deceased earlier. So let's see if we can make heads or tails of this from him.
attempt to rewarm a body. Loosely, the idea being that the heart, among other organs,
Loosely?
will function better or function at all in a warmer environment.
So you mean the body works better if it's not frozen?
That's one goal of resuscitation. With him, as I recall, despite resuscitative efforts for approximately half an hour, there was not a not a significant warming of his core temperature.
And so, sir, with reference to
Lally.
with reference to Mr. O'Keefe, at some point,
With reference
pronounced deceased by
I'm
yourself.
Lally.
Yes.
And do you see any indication within the chart as to what time that was?
Sure. I'll just need this moment here.
All right, we're going to get a time of death here. Finally.
According to my note, it looks like the time of death was death declaration was 7:50 in the morning.
Is that 50 or 15?
50.
And in general, sir, do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Or what do you recognize it?
Yes.
The first part I recognized would have been the medical record or medical note with respect to Miss Reed, who was also a patient that morning.
Now, sir, if you know about what time was it that Miss Reed came into the emergency department at Good Samaritan that morning?
Now we're getting to the alcohol.
I mean, I can tell you from this chart, it looks like that her, at least the first posted vital signs were from 7:51 in the morning.
And in reference to Miss Reed, what is it that she came into Good Samaritan in regard to? Why was she there?
Oh my God. Did you guys,
I'd have to review.
did you guys hear that? Oh no, let's listen again. I think this is the question that believe it was somebody, was it you, Candace? Somebody was referring to Runkle pointing out one of the worst questions ever. That might have been it.
In reference to Miss Reed, what is it that she came into Good Samaritan in regard to?
Like, why? Let's listen one more time. I don't even know. I have to timestamp this.
We're from 7:51 in the morning.
And in reference to Miss Reed, what is it that she came into Good Samaritan in regard to? Why was she there?
I'd have to review Daisy's note. So
Oh.
Well, let me
no,
ask you this.
don't
Was
do
it
that,
in
'cause that's
reference to
hearsay.
Section 12?
yes.
And with regard to Section
Oh my God,
12,
Lally, shut up.
patients that come in regard to that,
Oh my God.
what kind of
Oh my
involvement do you
Again?
have, or who, if anyone, do you work with in regard to those types of patients?
Oh, that.
Sure. So Section
that
12.
question's even worse than the previous one. How is it possible? Let's listen again. I don't even know.
Why was she there?
I'd have to review Daisy's note. So
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Well, let me ask you this, sir. Was it in reference to Section 12? Do you recall?
yes.
And with regard to Section 12, patients that come in regard to that, what kind of involvement do you have, or who, if anyone, do you work with in regard to those types of patients?
There were three in regards. I think there was one in reference to another who if there was a who if any and what if any. Let's listen one more time. That's insanity.
Do you recall?
Yes.
And with regard to Section 12, patients that come in regard to that, what kind of involvement do you have, or who, if anyone, do you work with in regard to those types of patients?
Yeah, there are three in regards to and one who if anyone. There might have been a what if any. I don't.
Sure. So Section 12, I would define as involuntary detention of a person.
What if Wally's actually like a robot or something? Maybe that could explain this because he's programmed to only use like he's got a vocabulary of like 12 words. That could explain a lot.
Usually for a mental health concern, whether that's self-harm or harm to others, or if someone who's afflicted with schizophrenia or psychosis, members of the public can bring someone to or the police or members of the public can bring someone to the hospital on a Section 12, which again involuntarily detains them for evaluation.
And what kind of involvement would you have as far as when someone comes in with that kind of issue? What is sort of the typical protocol or policies that
I don't think that's the right
Good
terminology.
Samaritan would undergo with reference to that patient? What are you doing with reference to the patient when they arrive?
Oh my God, Lally.
I'm sorry, I think I don't really understand what the question is.
Again? That's the 6th time so far?
And from your
Oh my God.
memory and or your review of the chart, was that done as far as the blood work done with regard to Ms. Reed on this day?
Oh my God.
Are you asking me if blood work was drawn?
Yes.
I believe so. I have to double
Listen,
check.
y'all, that was actually amazing because let's listen to this doctor who's no wordsmith himself rephrase Lolly's question into a way that makes sense in like 3 words. Let's listen again. That was incredible.
And
That was incredible.
from your memory and or your review of the chart, was that done as far as the blood work done with regard to Ms. Reed on this day?
Are you asking me if blood work was drawn?
Yes.
That's it.
I believe so. I have to double check.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Amazing.
So yes, it looks like there was blood work drawn.
Wow.
And among the things that were tested within the facility within Good
Wow.
Samaritan was an alcohol screen.
Wow.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is the result of that alcohol screen that's contained within those records?
Do I answer or no?
Yes.
So it looks like 93.93. I'd have to maybe look deeper in the chart to tell you the units of that measurement. I don't want to guess. So, but to answer your question, 93.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
God.
Ms. Little? Good afternoon.
Hi.
You testified that you treated Ms. Reed when she arrived at the hospital on January 29th.
Yeah, good point, student planner girl.
I don't know if I testified that I treated her, but I was involved in her care.
Yeah.
Yes.
You actually wrote the reports regarding her care, correct?
That is not correct.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the report?
The report, I believe we're talking about the note, the emergency room note was written by a nurse practitioner.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at some additional reports from January 29th?
Sounds like you want to show me some reports, so sure.
Thank you.
I
You
think he was,
testified that you treated Mr. O'Keefe upon arrival on January 29th.
I think he was fair to say that to her, honestly. I don't know why she's, you know. It was, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.
Correct?
Yes.
Did a firefighter ever approach you on the morning of January 29th and tell you that he had information suggesting that the victim had been struck by a vehicle?
Objection.
Do you remember that?
I do not.
So if a firefighter indicated that he informed you that he had information suggesting that Mr. O'Keefe had been in some sort of vehicular accident, that's something that you would have included in your report, correct?
I don't know if that's a fair assumption.
But as you sit here today, you have no recollection whatsoever of anyone telling you that the victim had appeared to be in some sort of car accident, correct?
So I think that what I was trying to say, right, was that on my note it says per EMS report. So one of the medics, as in one of the folks on the ambulance who brought Mr. O'Keefe in, again, I'm not right in front of my note, but as I recall, it said something to the effect of per EMS report, the patient may have been struck by a vehicle. All right, so,
I'll ask the question. Is your recollection
course.
refreshed?
yes.
Is there anywhere on that report that says that the patient came in and there was a statement by EMS that the victim appeared to have been struck by a vehicle?
Just give me a moment to read through the.
Sure.
So no, there is not.
In fact, there's no mention of a vehicle whatsoever, correct?
That's correct.
John O'Keefe did not have a single other injury on his body from the neck down, correct?
I don't know if that's fair to say.
From the neck down, he did not have a single broken bone, right?
I don't know if that's a fair assessment or statement.
You certainly didn't notate in your report that he had any broken bones from the neck down, correct?
No, I did not. I'd happy to explain that, but to answer your question, no, I did not.
You did not report a single fracture from the neck down, correct?
I did not report a single fracture, correct?
No further questions.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you,
You
Your Honor.
know, so that's important, right? Because obviously the concept that this could have been a car accident is kind of ridiculous. And, you know, somehow he has damage only to like his head area, right? Apart from the scrapes on his arm. And yet the theory would be that he was hit with a taillight. So if the only damage to the car is the taillight in the bumper region, that one, if you want to call it that one little denty thing, and the only damage to him is his head, the only way that would happen is if he was like 4 feet tall. So I don't know. I guess that's not too much of a stretch for the Commonwealth at this point.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Garrey Fowler.
We're on to Garrey Fowler again. This feels like a lifetime ago. We are on to him. So he's a pathologist.
F as in Frank, A-L-L-E-R.
And sir, that microphone in front of you, you can move that
Okay.
any way you wish. So if you want to bring it up or down, just the wand itself.
Okay.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I'm a pathologist.
And where is it that you work?
I work at Good Samaritan Medical Center.
Now, with regard to your position at Good Samaritan, what is it that you do at Good Samaritan? What are your sort of duties and responsibilities in relation to that hospital?
Yes, I am the chief of pathologist at Good Samaritan Medical Center. Also the laboratory medical director. So my job at Good Samaritan is to ensure, quality of both the anatomic pathology side of things as well as the clinical pathology side of things. Ultimately, my job is to help ensure that any laboratory report coming from Good Samaritan is accurate.
Lifting your attention to a previously tapped portion of those records, do you see a result for alcohol within those records?
Mr. Lally, you have to keep your voice up when you're here as well.
Let me say it again, sir. Doctor, with reference to those records in the page that I've opened up to, do you see a record in regard to a lab result for alcohol testing with regard to Ms. Reed?
Yes,
And what is it reported as, sir?
it is reported at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
And is that, as far as milligrams per deciliter, is that a relatively standard way of reporting an alcohol result?
Yes, it is in our hospital systems.
Could you explain to the jury sort of milligram per deciliter what that reading means as far as the metric that's used there?
Well, it means 93 milligrams of alcohol per deciliter of
Oh my
the
God, I
blood.
know. That's right.
And our-
Before you do that, doctor,
That's so funny. As soon as that was coming out of my mouth, I was like, why do I feel like there's something else that I'm supposed to be saying here? You're right. He's a gray boy in disguise.
so we might have to
Oh my
turn
God.
off the fans, which we
It all comes full circle. Oh, so now he's gonna get scolded about the speaking.
don't want to do. I really need you to keep your voice up so that the court officer over there, so that folks down there can hear you.
Okay. Cleanse the area with a non-alcohol swab, which in this case the order was for
All
alcohol.
right, so doctor, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you. I think part of it is that you're saying so much and your voice is fine and then it drops and it's fine and then it
Okay.
drops. So Paul, can we turn the fans off, please? It's important that all the
I feel actually kind of sorry for him here because listen to his response. It's kind of sad.
jurors hear everything you say, doctor.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so but speak into the
Okay, I'm
microphone.
going to bring it really close.
All right, this
So-
should be better with
And hopefully you can turn it back on when I get better at this.
I feel bad for him. He's like, when I get better at this.
So I'm sorry.
I mean, I have to say, their faces couldn't be any closer to the microphone. Like, even when she's like, speak into the microphone, it's like, there's some of them that are like, speaking quietly. I mean, well, fucking Lally is the biggest mumbler of all, but I mean, every single day there's witnesses who I feel like are clearly projecting, and she's like, you have to speak into the microphone. And it's like, the microphone will be in their throat if they get any closer to it. So at some point you have to wonder, like, do they just need better microphones? Do they just need better technology? Because this is absurd. Like, you know what I mean?
It's hot. I'm hot too.
I feel bad for
Aware
them.
of, through your training experience, sort of a conversion that can be done between sort of what's reported as the testing from the serum plasma to a whole blood count?
In the hospital, we're pretty much in the business of, reporting alcohol, in serum or plasma, and we're not in the business of the legal aspects of alcohol testing, because alcohol, what I understand is the alcohol legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08 grams per deciliter. We don't make any conversions in a hospital. We're not in that business to do that. We just report on the serum percentage or the plasma level, and we don't make any attempts to do any official conversion to a whole blood level. If we did, we'd have to validate. We'd have to do many studies, and we're just not in the business for that.
And I understand that's not how it's reported within your record or at your facility. What my question is, are you aware of a process by which you can sort of then mathematically convert from milligrams per deciliter to a gram?
I am aware of that. Recently, I had to read about it, but up until recently I was not aware. So I'm not in that. We're not in the business for whole blood. But there is a formula. I do know about it, it's there is a if one wants to convert a whole a serum or a plasma level to a whole blood, there are formulas that basically you need to. It's a simple formula, but there's varying opinions on which formula can be used.
Okay. Between him and the guy right before him, I don't know that volume would help anything. It's just really hard to listen to this testimony from him and the guy before him. I don't think volume would save it, to my opinion.
Now, as far as this specific patient, the defendant, Ms. Reed, do you have any sense from the chart in front of you as far as sort of the timeline of when the blood was drawn to when it was tested and reported and things of that nature?
I think it was the order was 9:03 in the morning. 5 minutes later, the phlebotomist. It happened pretty fast. 5 minutes later, the phlebotomist got the labels printed. Then 5 minutes after that, they went in and drew it. It was very quickly. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but ultimately it was received in our lab, I think, 10 minutes after the order, the blood, very quickly. And then the final result, when the alcohol level was reported in the computer system, was, I think, 50 minutes from the time of the order.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Wonderful.
All right, Mr. Lally.
That's all just really foundational.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the
He does a
judge?
good job.
Sure, my name is Nicholas Roberts, Roberts.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I'm currently employed with a company called Thermo Fisher as a field service engineer
And how long have you been doing that?
since November of last year.
And so prior to that, or prior to November of last year, 2023, where did you work before that?
I was in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in the toxicology unit.
And how long did you work in the toxicology unit at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Since October of 2014.
Now, sir, if I could turn your attention to May of 2022, you're working with the lab at that time, is that correct?
Yes,
And were you assigned to serum conversions at that particular time?
I was, yes.
And at some point were you specifically assigned to a case involving a Ms. Karen Reed?
Yes.
Now, as far as a serum conversion is concerned, if you could explain to the jury sort of what goes into that process and what is it that you're reviewing or you're looking at, how is a serum conversion, what is it, and how is it performed?
Sure. So with serum conversions, usually what happens is that we get hospital results. So that would be the police or the ADAs would get results from the hospitals that whoever was attended to. We get the results, and usually hospital alcohol results they use serum in order to test alcohol. Serum is essentially the liquid portion of blood. Let's say, for instance, you fall and you cut yourself, that red stuff that comes out, that has serum within it. What the hospital does, they centrifuge it or spin it very fast in order to get the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and all kinds of the heavier materials out of that blood. And what's left is the serum. So they use that to test their alcohol. What studies have shown is that we actually tend to have a higher alcohol concentration in serum than in blood. So what that means is that due to the chemical nature of alcohol, it likes to stay in that liquid portion more than throughout the whole blood. So a serum conversion essentially is able to convert the alcohol content from that serum that we get from the hospital into what it would be in whole blood.
And did you have occasion to perform a serum conversion in regard to Ms. Reed's medical records?
Yes. So this is the serum conversion report that I made, with the calculations were made on May 3rd of 2022.
And as far as the result that you received, in addition, so what kind of materials did you receive in order to perform that analysis?
We got the medical records.
What was reported in the medical records that you reviewed and using in your serum conversion analysis as far as the level?
The level was at 93 milligrams per deciliter.
And so, with regard to that 93 milligrams per deciliter, I'm sorry, was there also a time that specimen was collected as far as your review of those records?
Yes.
And what was that time, sir?
It was at 9 in the morning, 9:08.
Now, as far as just in terms of the general term, as far as forensic science, what you did at the lab, can you explain what that term means or what you did in relation to that?
What do you mean specifically?
That
Y'all.
was very poorly phrased.
That right. Oh, we're gonna want to hear that one again. That reminded me so much of the "It's Just Physics" from Murdoch. Let's listen again.
Just in terms of the general term as far as forensic science, what you did at the lab, can you explain what that term means or what you did in relation to that?
What do you mean specifically?
That was very poorly
Oh my
phrased.
God, Lally.
Let me try to restate that a bit. What is your understanding of forensic science, and can you explain that to me?
Oh, forensic science is essentially a scientific study based on anything dealing with the law. So whether it comes to ballistics or DNA analysis or toxicology, like I did, anything focused or based on the law or for legal purposes, essentially that's what forensic science kind of encapsulates.
And forensic toxicology, would that sort of be a subset of forensic science?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your understanding based on your training and experience, what is forensic toxicology?
Oh my God.
So toxicology in general is essentially just a study of poisons, plainly speaking. So anything that'd be harmful to the body, essentially that would be toxicology, because you also not only have forensic toxicology, but you also have like environmental. And the forensic toxicology is just, like I said, again, with the forensic science, it's just basing it on things for legal purposes.
Now, through your training experience, are you familiar with sort of the difference between a serum plasma level versus a whole blood level?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury sort of what your understanding is of each and what, if any, differences there are between the two?
So just plainly your serum plasma level, or the serum plasma is what it's called. It could be referred to as either or one or the other. So that's it's just the alcohol level in your serum, whereas your whole blood is your alcohol content or regular BAC in the whole blood. This difference between the two is, like I said previously, in your serum or plasma, that alcohol content would be higher as it would have been in the whole blood.
Now, as far as the milligrams per deciliter, how that's reported in the Good Samaritan medical records referencing Ms. Reed that you reviewed in this case, is that typical as far as how hospitals would report sort of the serum plasma levels?
Yeah, from my experience and all the times that I've seen serum conversions come to the lab, milligram per deciliters are the units that they use from the hospital, yeah.
Now, as far as that 93 milligrams per deciliter, what, if anything, with regard to serum conversion, what, if anything, are you then able to do to convert that to a BAC or a blood alcohol concentration?
So based on some studies, they came up with a few different conversion factors, knowing that the blood alcohol content would be higher than the serum plasma content. They're able to apply different conversion factors to the numbers that we would get in serum. And we usually get, excuse me, we usually give a low, an average, and a high, being that it's kind of hard to say what one particular person's conversion factor would be between the two of them, since it's dependent upon like age, sex, the water content, what you had to eat that day. So it's harder to pinpoint. Therefore, we give a good range as what it could possibly be pertaining just in case a person converts, or their conversion would be a lot lower or higher. So we give a good range.
And as far as those different
So
conversions,
one thing that really matters here with this stuff is, it sounds like he's really following the science, right? From like, science, it's just science. So However, just like with a lot of these they're not experts because they're not, I mean, in terms of being qualified as an expert, right? But like a lot of the forensic people, like the people we heard today, for example, right? It's a similar thing where like they just do their job, they test the thing, unless there's some sort of error that they make, which so far the only error that we know of was that first lady, the lady from Monday, who tested the hair wrong and missed the cuticle or something, but then her boss or her supervisor put her on hair probation, quote unquote. Other than that, everybody else, it's like they're just doing the testing, right? And so it really just sort of depends on what they're given, right? And so like with the people with the glass and the plastic and the shirt and whatever, what have you, the shoe, it's like they're given it by Trooper Proctor, and they're given it, and that's what they work with, right? So it's a similar thing. He's going to be performing this test based on the information he's given from law enforcement as to when they believe Karen's last drink was. And that's going to be really important in terms of, getting accurate results here based on the formula, because the formula is the formula, right?
Factors, where do those come from?
It's based on some studies. I don't remember the actual names of the papers that were thing, but they are based on studies throughout the forensic world when it comes to looking at specifically testing blood and serum to find that conversion factor.
And as far as those studies are concerned, do they come from sort of different population bases? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's how they were able to get the range of conversion factors that they use.
Now, as far as the water within the serum, or sort of how that works with the centrifuge, what, if any, relationship does that have to the reading that you get or the conversion factors that you use?
So the water content, essentially, if the serum being the liquid portion of the blood, water is also liquid. It makes up some of that serum that you get from it. Therefore, your higher water content, more essentially, the lower the concentration could be of that, or lower or higher, depending upon whether or not your water content in that sample is lower or higher.
So as far as those different conversion factors that you're using, this is essentially a mathematical calculation, is that right?
Yes.
And so the different conversion factors that you're using for the low, the average, and the high, what are those conversions?
Calculation.
So the low is a 1.18, with the average being a 1.14, and then the high being a 1.12.
So based on your analysis as far as the medical records and what was reported to you, using those three conversion factors, what, if anything, did you come up with as far as the low and average and high for the 93 milligrams per deciliter?
So our values that were calculated for the low was a 0.078 gram percent. The high was a 0.083 gram percent, with the average being a 0.081.
Now, sir, with reference to the alcohol that's reported in the records, are you familiar with, are there different types of alcohol?
Yes.
And can you explain sort of what those types are and what the differences are, or where they come from?
Sure. So there are multiple different types of alcohol, mainly based on the number of carbons that are within that molecule. You start off with methanol, which is one carbon. Methanol you can find in like some rubbing alcohols. You can find them in many different labs. You have big, large vials of them. Ethanol, which has two carbons. That one is the common one that is in our alcoholic beverages, and it goes all the way up isopropanol, octanol, etc. It all depends on the number of carbons in the chain of it.
And the type that's reported within Ms. Reed's medical records, that was ethanol, correct?
Correct.
And so, with regard to training experience as a forensic toxicologist, you're familiar with a term known as a central nervous system depressant?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that term means and how it relates to alcohol?
Sure. So alcohol is what is classified as a central nervous system depressant, and essentially the name kind of gives it away as to what it does. Your central nervous system is responsible for essentially all your movements, both involuntary and voluntary. So the way you move your head, the way you blink, the way you breathe, the central nervous system is responsible for all of that. With a depressant introduced into the body, it affects that central nervous system, causing things to slow down. So that's essentially what depressant means. It's going to slow down certain processes that a central nervous system would be in charge of. So you can have delayed reaction times. It can cause drowsiness.
Ask another question.
How would that manifest as far as the central nervous?
Yeah, that was
system,
outside
affecting
the scope of
the body?
expertise.
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
Go ahead.
There are many different effects that you could see or side effects from having a central nervous system depressant in the body. Lethargy, sleepiness, drowsiness, unable to walk properly, any kind of any one of those tests that you see on TV from the police when they try to get your horizontal gaze and they try to make sure you're coordinated, it can affect all those things.
That answer, I think, was completely objectionable because that's not actually answering the question. And that's just making an assumption that they've seen what they do on TV, not to mention that could be referencing a TV show, in which case that's people that are acting. And anyway, I can see why, it's outside his scope, right? He can't testify to all the neurological effects. And so anyway,
Now, sir, are you also familiar through your training and experience of working in forensic toxicology with a term known as retrograde extrapolation?
Yep.
And can you explain to the jury what you understand that term to mean?
So a retrograde extrapolation is essentially another calculation, but it allows you to be able to calculate what the possible blood alcohol content would have been at a time prior to when the blood was drawn. Say, for instance, blood was drawn at 2. You could essentially figure out what the blood alcohol content would have been at 10 in the morning prior to it.
And that's done with the calculation as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, what are some of the types
No,
of
Lally,
information
they
that
just
you would need to know or that you would want to know in order to perform a retrograde extrapolation?
We need to know, one, for sure, what the alcohol content would have been. We also need to know the time that the blood was drawn, as well as the time of the last alcohol consumption.
there you go.
Now, in regard to timing, as far as what, if any, limitations are there in regard to performing retrograde extrapolation as it pertains to
Oh my God.
timing is concerned?
You already said
So when we do these calculations, anything that's shorter than 2 hours, we usually don't do that conversion.
And why is that, sir?
Because we're built in within our calculations, we allow for 2 hours. That has to do with the way that alcohol leaves the body. If the alcohol is still being absorbed by the body, we want to give it enough time to get to a point where it's coming out of the body as opposed to increasing in the body. So that 2 hours puts the person at a point in which that alcohol will be coming out as opposed to it being absorbed.
So there are essentially 3 different sort of phases as far as intake of the alcohol into the body through dissipation. Is that
that
correct?
sounds like beginning.
Yeah, we have usually there's a well-known kind of metabolism route to which alcohol metabolizes out of the body. Yes.
And so can you describe to the jury sort of that metabolism process as far as how it starts to its end point?
Sure. So with having, let's say, 1 drink, what the body begins to do at that point is absorb the alcohol. Usually you get like a steady line that increases with time. So if you think of a regular chart where you have the level of alcohol in the body versus time, which would be on the y-axis or the x-axis at the bottom. As time goes along, after your first drink, the body starts to absorb the alcohol. If that was your only drink and that was it, the body then at a certain point, it stops absorbing it because there's no more to absorb and it plateaus. So essentially the line goes straight. After that point, the body starts to eliminate it at this point. And then your level or your concentration of alcohol within the body decreases with time as it's getting rid of it.
And so there's sort of the absorption phase, the plateau, and then the elimination phase. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that in the course of your analysis for retrograde extrapolation, it's important to know sort of when the last drink was. Is that right?
Yes.
And why is that?
That way we can get a good time in and figure out the amount of time that has passed between the last drink as well as the time that the blood was taken.
Now, did you perform a retrograde extrapolation analysis with regard to Ms. Reed's BAC or the converted BAC from the serum conversion?
I did.
And so with reference to Ms. Reed, as far as you looked at obviously the hospital records, you looked at the serum conversion report, what, if anything else, did you review or look at in coming to that retrograde extrapolation analysis?
We usually get a police incident report, and that usually identifies the time in which, per their narrative, what time in which they had the last drink. This is the retrograde extrapolation report that I did for the subject of Karen Reed.
Now, with respect to the time that you utilized in that report, as far as when was the time that you utilized as far as the last drink or time of operation?
The time that was utilized as the last drink, it was at 12:45.
That'd be 12:45 a.m., is that correct?
Correct.
And so you're using that to sort of extrapolate from 9:08 a.m. when the 93 milligram per deciliter is reported from Good Samaritan to 12:45 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Now, with regard to that 12:45 a.m., what, if any, difference would it make if it were a little bit off of that? Say it was 12:30 a.m. or it was 1 or 1:10 a.m. What, if any, impact would that have on your conversion?
So we tend to go by hours. So we kind of round to the nearest, I think, 15-minute interval. So a couple minutes or 10 to 20 minutes forward or behind of that 12:45, it wouldn't change the results by a lot, if any.
And similar to the serum conversion, is this done with different conversion factors as far as a low, an average, and a high?
So we usually just calculate a minimum and a maximum for the retrograde, and that incorporates some conversions as well.
Now, as far as the minimum versus the maximum, what of each of those sort of signify, or how do you come to those mathematical calculations?
So with the minimum calculation, we incorporate the 2-hour period. So we assume that maybe that 12:45 wasn't, the body wasn't at that point finished with the elimination. It wasn't in the elimination phase, so we allow it for 2 hours ahead of it. We also have a conversion factor. Once again, this is a study that was done to see the elimination rate of different people within a population, what rate they would get alcohol out of their system per hour. So we applied the lower limit, which was a 0.1 gram % per hour, with that 2-hour allotted time interval, and then we use the lower serum conversion number, the one that was converted on the lower end. We use all of that in the calculation in order to come up with the minimum. The maximum one uses the opposite, so it uses the higher converted serum conversion number with the higher elimination rate, using the full amount of time.
And these calculations or these conversion factors are all based on sort of medical studies that you reviewed in literature that goes in your...
Yes, sort of medical studies. I find it interesting too, in the first place, that he's referencing studies, but they're not actually saying what studies are. I mean, usually if you're going to be talking about studies, that comes from expert testimony, and those would be, you would talk about what studies they were, and you would build up their credibility, because it's sort of like he's basing this on, like, the way he's describing it, he's like saying it's based on a study or studies, but then not even naming the studies. So it's just a little bit odd.
Your training?
Yeah, all of it was part of the training, and they came up with those numbers prior to even when I was hired there. But it is based on multiple different studies in that, looking at that elimination rate.
And so from your calculations when it came to the minimum with regard to the retrograde extrapolation, what if any calculation, what if any result did you come from with your calculations as it pertained to the minimum?
So the minimum amount that was calculated would have been a 0.135 gram percent.
And that's essentially reporting in a blood alcohol concentration, is that correct?
Correct.
And then with regard to the maximum, what if any result did you get from your mathematical calculations in regard to that?
The result was a 0.292 gram percent.
And so that range that you receive is a bit of a wide range, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And why is that?
So we base those calculations. They're based on that conversion that I did from the hospital results from Serum, giving us a good range of values in the first place. But then we incorporate the retrograde extrapolation one, which uses a time factor, and that 2-hour difference using two different elimination rates that causes a wider span of values, and it's just so that it can encompass essentially anybody within the general population, that they would be somewhere in between that lower limit and that upper limit.
So essentially from those mathematical calculations, anyone within sort of the general population with that result would be somewhere between the 0.13 and the 0.29, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Excellent. Yay. On cross.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You used a method called retrograde extrapolation to reach your sort of opinions and conclusions in this case, correct?
Yeah, it was a calculation.
Falling out too.
And that means that you rely on an assumption that a trend will continue beyond sort of observable data.
So the metabolism is actually pretty well studied. So we know that elimination rate, unless you introduce more alcohol into the system, it declines at that rate, and it's pretty linear.
Exactly. So in other words, certain assumptions are incredibly important for you to reach your analysis.
Sure.
And that includes sort of the timing of the very last drink that the individual had. Is that right?
Yes.
If your drinking pattern is sort of different than what you assume for purposes of your calculation, then you'd agree that your entire extrapolation would be incorrect. Is that right?
Yes, it could be.
And again, those assumptions sort of included the time of the incident, right?
Yes.
And importantly, the time of the last drink.
So those two will be what we use. It's the time of the blood draw as well as the time of the incident or last drink.
And your report acknowledges that the testing that was used to obtain ethanol results in this case was not performed by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
Correct.
And for that reason, the report and those results do not fall under your forensic lab accreditation standards.
Correct.
The Massachusetts State Police, as you testified, is an accredited forensic lab.
Yes.
And so you're required to meet certain minimum standards in order to uphold that.
Yes.
And you'd agree that those accreditation standards are different from accreditation standards that, say, a hospital lab might have.
They can be.
And do you ever work on testing within the Massachusetts State Police Lab for serum tests or whole blood tests?
So we did test blood and serum for alcohol content at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. Yes.
And their typical protocols are to use whole blood tests.
We use whole blood or serum.
I think this is her best cross so far, Miss Little. Yeah.
In terms of the machinery that's used with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you'd agree that the gold standard is gas chromatography and mass spectrometry machines.
Usually with a headspace detector.
I'll let it go ahead. You can answer that.
Usually with a headspace detector, yes.
And that would detect whole blood rather than serum.
No, it just detects any volatile substance.
But you'd agree that a serum test usually, as you testified, has a much higher level than whole blood.
Yeah, due to the nature of the substance itself.
And so you kind of have to go through this extra step of trying to extrapolate, okay, how do I convert this to get to whole blood?
So what we incorporated anytime we had a serum.
One thing I will say is that nobody really made this easy to understand. Like, you know what I mean? And perhaps if like I was saying, I think this is her best cross so far. I do. I do wonder though, had it been like Yannetti or Jackson doing this, not that, I wonder if it would have been different, not in terms of like the information coming out on cross, but just in terms of, because like what we've seen with this whole thing, right, is everything is really confusing from the prosecution. And then, everything gets clarified with cross, like, and that's when it's like, oh, okay, that's what that, you know what I mean? It's like they come through and then make things make sense. And so, I do wonder if it would have been helpful in terms of understanding this process better, because Lally does a terrible job. And then I wouldn't say that, like I was saying, like it is her best cross, but I don't think it makes the information more accessible in terms of this is a very specific thing that they're talking about, right? And I guess in my mind, it's like the way that she's asking her questions, they're doing what they're supposed to do in the sense of like finding ways where there could have been errors, right, in terms of the outcome of the testing. Could this affect it? Could this affect it? Could this affect it? Yes, that's their job. But I think it would have been even better if her first goal had been, let's see if we can simplify this and put it in terms that are understandable for the jury and for everyone, and then go through and do the rest. Because it's kind of clear, even from her questioning, it sounds like she doesn't even fully understand some of this terminology, and it's just getting a little bit confusing.
Sample submitted to the lab for alcohol testing, we actually did the same serum conversion in order to figure out what the blood alcohol concentration would have been.
And that's an extra step that you have to take using conversion factors, correct?
Yep, that's a calculation.
You're not actually testing for ethanol in the blood. You're testing for
I think too,
an ADA.
I think too that's something that can happen, and it makes sense, right? If you think about attorneys that, especially if you think about young attorneys, right? You can imagine this makes sense, like right out of law school. I would imagine that it's pretty easy for an attorney to be really focused on what they're taught and like how to do all the things. And what they're taught is they're taught the strategy, and they're taught, right? Like that's what you can see is like in other words, she's got kind of like, she's oh, what's the right word? She's got like she's like laser focused on getting to these points of where there could have been issues with the testing. Because that's what you're taught, like that as a way to be a defense attorney, right? But the part that's missing is the part that I don't know is probably not taught quite as much, and maybe it's something that comes more through experience, right? And that's it's the importance of taking the time, and then how to take the time to ask a question that will simplify the information for the jury first. So that, in other words, it's like the priority shouldn't be your own strategy. The priority should be simplifying it for the jury to understand. Not dumbing it down, but just, well, because usually it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Like, in other words, I think in this trial, this is way more of a necessity than it is other times, because usually sometimes there will be clarification from the prosecution on direct, where it's like not quite as much of a disaster. But in this trial, we don't learn anything, and everything's really confusing on direct. So, and that's why these cross examinations have felt like such a relief, because then you're like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. So anyway, it's just, and we've seen that from Jackson and from Yannetti. And so I just think that would have been something that I would have liked to have seen first, is for her to, again, start with like, okay, okay, Mr. Roberts, we used a lot of big words, and I know this is, you're really, you're really proficient at your expertise, at your job, and it's clear you know what you're doing, but let's just see if we can just put this into terms that I can understand. That type of thing, right? I think that would have been a really good way to start it.
And then you have to do a conversion to get it to what a whole blood test would just automatically show you.
Yeah, so we get the serum level and then we convert it via calculation.
And typically in the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, you would do what's called confirmatory.
Last thing I promise on this point, I guess to summarize that, I feel like if you're a really good defense attorney, your priority shouldn't be what your own goal is. It shouldn't be what, your own strategy is. It should be the jury. Your everything that you do should be thinking about the jury and not furthering, I guess in a way you could call it furthering your own agenda, although that's not quite what it is, but similar, right? Like just being like hell-bent on like trying to get through what you want to get through. You should put yourself aside and think about the jury. That's my 2 cents.
Testing.
Yeah, so we have a screening method as well as a confirmatory test, correct?
And confirmatory testing means that you take 2 separate samples and you test both of those.
Essentially, well, our protocol involved testing in duplicate, but that's not always the case for the other drugs that we tested. We essentially have a screening test, which is one type of test, and then the confirmatory test would be a separate test, or sometimes even the same test, just we run the sample again.
And the reason you typically would do 2 tests is to ensure that there's no error in the testing.
Correct.
And that acts as a fail-safe against false positives. You
Yes.
agree with that? And it also ensures that you're testing the correct sample.
Correct.
And in this case, obviously, you didn't conduct any of the testing.
Correct.
You're just assuming the accuracy of a single test that was performed by a hospital.
Action.
I'll allow it.
Yeah. How's
Yeah.
that objectionable?
And so if the clinical results are invalid, then your extrapolation is going to be invalid.
Yes.
Now, you discussed a lot about sort of
I like that he just said, yeah, and he didn't try to bullshit around that answer. I think that was good too.
serum testing and conversion rates. Do you recall that testimony?
Yeah.
And you'd agree that the precise conversion rate between serum ethanol levels and whole blood ethanol levels is almost impossible to accurately predict.
For each individual person, it would be difficult. Yes.
And that's because the amount of water in our blood is scientifically impossible to predict with accuracy.
I'm not aware of any kind of test that would do that. So, yeah.
I was just saying,
Because
maybe outside
individuals
of
are
the
different, right?
Yes.
And so the conversions that you use are based on averages from scientific studies.
Yes.
But you'd agree that in certain instances, people can fall outside of that average range.
Yeah.
In fact, a comparison of, hospital serum alcohol levels, they range quite wildly. You'd agree with that.
Yeah.
In fact, you're aware that some studies show that a conversion rate from serum alcohol to blood alcohol can be as high as 1.59%.
I wasn't aware of those numbers, but yeah, it could range. That's why we give a wide range, and you could lie on the outskirts of either side.
And so that would mean that the actual blood alcohol content, once it goes through the conversion rate, would be much, much lower than sort of the average conversion rate that you relied on.
Yeah, it could be both higher and lower.
And that includes that range that you gave, right?
Yeah, it could fall within the range.
Now, you testified that your retrograde extrapolation assumes that Ms. Reed reached the elimination phase of processing alcohol at or before sort of 12:45 a.m.
Yeah, we allow for, we start for the maximum at the 12:45, and then it would have been 2:45 for the minimum.
And so for purposes of your calculation, if Ms. Reed drank alcohol after 12:45 a.m. and before her blood was drawn at 9:08 a.m., your entire calculation would be invalid.
Yeah.
No further questions.
Hey, Mr. Lally.
Just briefly.
So
So when they
one thing too I wanted to say about today is that I didn't finish. I'm trying to think if I don't know that I got to the very end of Trooper Buchanan's testimony. I think I got close though, but they were at the point where they were counting how many drinks she was having through the video. Um, so they were counting how many drinks, and basically, though, what I wanted to say is like, I recall like where I had left off, and I think he wasn't done counting. It was something like 8 drinks she was on at that point, which, you know, I feel I would have thought that would have like killed you, to be honest. So what I'm looking up though is like a shot. So I feel one thing I was going to say though is I do think that there's less alcohol in a shot out like ounces wise than in like a mixed drink. So like in other words, I'm looking that up to confirm it, because we know that a lot of what she was having was like shots. It seems like like they were buying shots and then she was like putting them into the glass, which also had soda water in it. So that like if you were, in other words, like that potentially would have been less alcohol than if she'd ordered a fresh drink with a vodka soda. By the way, Tito's, like, ew. No offense to Tito's, just not, I don't care for it. Where is, okay, so yeah, 1.5 ounces is a shot. Well, it looks like, okay. It looks like too, there's some variation depending on like the bartender. Well, which of course there is, right? But it is weird because it does seem like it should be kind of standardized. But of course, it also does get confusing too, because then you've got your different percentages in terms of what proof or whatever. So, okay, let's see. Oh, relation to blood alcohol content. It's not helpful actually. I do know a martini though is like automatically by default more ounces. I think it might be 2 ounces. I'm just gonna double check. Yeah, no, 3 ounces. Okay. I've actually never even had a martini in my life. Wow, it says so traditionally it's 2 to 4 ounces. That's wild. 4 ounces. Wow. Think about that, right? Holy shit. If it's 4 ounces of alcohol, that's the equivalent of over 2 shots if you're going with the 1.5 ounces, right? So if you take that, right, and you take her 8 quote unquote drinks, but it was like shots, say, as an example, but you were to convert that into like martinis, it would be fewer drinks. Anyway, I'm just trying to understand it because it seems like so much drinks. Like it just seems like so many drinks. Like, and also it's just so bizarre because everybody said that she seemed, I mean, they didn't say sober, but they said she didn't seem intoxicated. So I don't know. Having said that, everybody they were asking was also drinking. So it's just. Lemon drop is a type of martini, right? I don't think I've ever had a lemon drop. And a cosmopolitan, is that also? So hold on. Let me just see. Yeah, so these are, I guess it's funny because it's like there are these other like martini spin-offs, but like in my mind, they're really more of a cocktail because a martini to me has to have vermouth. Yeah, so like Yeah, lemon drop is a type of martini, but like I'm looking it up. It's vodka, triple sec, lemon juice. Yeah, that sounds great. And then there's like a cosmopolitan. Yeah, again, looks like a type of martini as well. Oh, it's a member of the gimlet family. Huh. I wonder what makes it so. I've never had a cosmopolitan either. Really funny. Yeah, I've never had any of these I guess quote unquote girly drinks or whatever. What makes it? What's the gimlet family? Let's all learn together. Oh, interesting. Gimlet is a cocktail made of gin and lime, but Cosmos are made of vodka, are they not? Yeah. I don't understand. Okay, well, anyway. Yeah, I've never had. Now, having said that, my favorite, like, I was thinking about this too because it was funny when she was saying vodka soda. Like, my favorite, just like in terms of like a basic cocktail, like nothing fancy, but just like a good, like, if I were to be out somewhere, which never happens, but it would be a Moscow Mule. So like with good ginger beer and like good mint, fresh mint. But like if I was out at like a bar situation, which again never happens, but like where they're not going to even have a ginger beer, like if I was at like a place like the Waterfall, right? I would do vodka and ginger ale because everywhere has ginger ale. Like vodka soda though, I don't know. I don't think I've ever had that, but that sounds gross. But yeah, ginger beer is awesome.
In this instance, Mr. Roberts, you're dealing with a time of incident that was known, correct?
Yes, it was given to me that it was at 12:45.
And as far as the BAC or the serum conversion
Also, I feel like I recall Runkle recently talking about how he liked lemon drops.
that was coming from a medical record, so that was known as well at 9:08 in the morning.
The time that the blood was drawn, yeah, that was known as well.
Now, as far as the question you were just asked, if the defendant drank alcohol after 12:45, does that include sort of shortly after 12:45, or how long after 12:45 would it take in order to affect your calculations or your retrograde extrapolation?
It's hard to say where that would have skewed it. It would have definitely caused a different time frame depending on how long after the incident or the reported last drink. If there was another drink in between there, it just shortened up the amount of time that would have been prior to the blood draw for sure.
What I'm asking is, would it have any significant
No one
impact,
knows
or
what
would
you're
there be any
asking.
difference if the last drink was, say, at 1 a.m. versus 5 a.m.?
So that would be a 4-hour difference. So essentially, that could, given the conversion rates, that would put the numbers very different. Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is, so the 5 a.m. would
No one knows
significantly
what
impact your calculations, correct?
Yes.
The 1 a.m., would that significantly impact your calculations?
No.
Help me.
You all set, Ms. Little?
If I could just ask one question. You said that you were given 12:45 as the time that you sort of based your analysis on. And
Yes.
to be clear, that was not something that was provided to you by my client, right?
No.
That was something that was provided to you from a police report.
Correct.
No further questions.
Okay.
All right.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Favorite thing. I love him.
Good afternoon, sir.
I love it.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name? for the
Wise.
jury?
He's my favorite person of all time.
Michael Trotta, TROTTA.
Guy in his shirt. I adore it. He wanted a match. Bless his heart. I
And
love
where
it.
do you live, sir?
Sharon, Mass.
How long have you lived in Sharon?
Long in Sharon since 82.
And what do you do for work, sir?
I am the superintendent of public works for the town of Canton.
And how long have you held that position as superintendent of public works?
Since 2003.
And did you work for the town of Canton prior to 2003?
No.
Now, with regard to being the superintendent of public works, can you describe to the jury sort of what are your duties and responsibilities when it comes to that work?
Typical management duties of staffing, controlling, directing, working on the budget, working on scheduling, long-term scheduling, 5 to 10 years, capital planning, overall operations, the day-to-day operations, what it takes to maintain a water system, a sewer system, the road system.
Now, with reference to, if I could turn your attention back to late January, early February of 2022. At some point in early February, were you contacted by a trooper in regard to a blizzard that had happened the week before?
Yes.
And do you recall who that trooper was or
Proctor?
how they contacted you?
I believe it was Michael Porter, and I believe the contact was by phone.
Now, with reference to that trooper, is that someone that you knew or you had spoken to before in any way?
No.
And prior to that date, did you know a John O'Keefe or a Karen Reed or anybody?
No.
Or anybody. I'm sorry.
As far as,
anybody? He didn't know anybody in his entire life.
As far as anybody within an Albert family within the town of Canton, were you familiar with them? Did you know them at the time?
No.
Now, when you were contacted in that early February of 2022, with regard to the blizzard the week before, what if anything, was the trooper asking you? What kind of information were they looking for?
He wanted to know what the procedure was when we prepare and staff a snowstorm.
And if you could explain to the jury sort of what is the procedure, or what at that time, what was the procedure and what was sort of the makeup of what Canton DPW would do with regard to a snowstorm?
Well, we have the town is divided up into, I believe, 29 plow routes.
Y'all, I'm struggling. I'm trying my best to figure out what the point is of why he was called. Now, having said that, every prosecution witness, in my opinion, so far has really helped the defense. So when I'm asking that question, I don't mean, what I mean is like, I don't see how it's relevant to anything really. I'm going to try my best to figure it out, but I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Several main routes and side routes. The routes are generally somewhere between 3 miles and 3.5 miles long. And we have 30, I think back then we had 39 pieces of our own and probably 30 something private plow trucks. We try very hard to have 2 trucks on a route, but we generally don't get enough. So if we try to have a town truck on a route with a private plow on a route. The private plow is procured through a bid process. They have to have a contract. They have to have insurance, liability insurance, and they have to show that they've paid their taxes to the state and that they have workers' comp. And they have a contract with the town. Then the operations manager.
What we're doing right now is we're learning, in case anybody wants to go and live in Massachusetts and become a snowplow driver for the city of Canton, we're learning all of the requirements you need to have to get this job, basically. That's what we're learning right now. Okay. Good to know. I mean, you know.
Was in charge of the on-site, boots on the ground, if you want to call it that. He'll assign the specific truck and the private contractor to a route. Generally, the day before, maybe 12, 18 hours before, the two of us talk. We try to schedule the overtime so that you're not going home at 3 o'clock and then you're getting woken up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to come back. We like to schedule it so when the guys go home, they know when they're going to come back.
Having said that, that is interesting. I didn't really I didn't hear that before to where I understood the significance. That's actually interesting. Now, just like most things, that's really good testimony for the defense, right? Because check it out, like, you know, Caitlin Albert's boyfriend. Now, I don't think he was working for this dude. He was working for somebody else. However, it does sound like this would be kind of a best practice. And the way that he was describing his schedule is the opposite of what this dude's describing. So, man, play. Oh my God, no. Why did it do that? Hold on. Sorry. Let me go to where we were. It jumped again. Let's see if that's about it.
At a scheduled time.
Aha.
And so there'd be about, and correct me if I'm wrong, there'd be about 30 some odd trucks that were sort of DPW trucks.
Oh, wait,
A few more. I'm not sure. 3 o'clock.
Here we go.
And then you're getting woken up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to come back. We like to schedule it so when the guys go home, they know when they're going to come back. To the best of our ability, that's what we'll do. We'll tell the contractors when they are expected. And generally, if we're plowing, it starts with a sanding operation. So we would have a sanding fleet, which is maybe a dozen trucks. They'll come in early, and then the rest of the public works people come in at a scheduled time.
And so there'd be about, and correct me if I'm wrong, there'd be about 30 some odd trucks that were sort of DPW trucks.
A few more. I'm not sure the exact number. It's probably 37 or 38 because that counts sidewalk plows too. So there may be, I think there's 3 sidewalk plows, so there's probably 34 or 35, we'll say, between medium-sized trucks and the big construction trucks.
And that was sort of my next question. As far as the DPW trucks are concerned, do they vary in size, or what is sort of the range and size of the town truck?
They'll go from a pickup, 2-ton pickup, F-150 or F-250 Ford, if you're familiar with that, to a medium-duty 20,000 to 22,000 pound truck up to a large construction truck, which is generally 26, 28,000 pounds.
Now,
The large truck is a 6-wheel truck.
and as far as
I love
the
him.
other trucks, the private
I
ones,
want
those
him
would
to
sort of be
be my
subcontracted
grandfather.
out through the bidding process, is that correct?
Yes.
And would the range, as far as the size of those trucks, would that be similar or something different?
If they are pickup trucks, usually lighter pickup trucks, there may be a couple of front end loaders. There's probably, I don't think there's any big heavy duty trucks, but they're probably pickups. Might be couple of Jeeps, pickups. Again, a medium duty like an F-350 or F-450 pickup. Those are Fords, and loaders.
Now, with respect to questions or what you were asked about by the trooper, was there a specific sort of street or plow route that the trooper was inquiring about?
I believe he asked who was down, that's Fairview, or down in the Cedar Crest area, that's what we call it. I believe that's what he asked me.
When you're driving, or when the plow drivers are plowing the roads, what, if any, sort of instructions are they given as far as how to first start plowing the roads when they first come upon sort of dropping the plows and going?
If we're in a plowable situation, which is kind of hard to define, it's generally when we feel that traffic is impeded or may not be able to safely get up and down the street. So that's probably anywhere around 2 inches. they're instructed, and we're expecting a heavy snow. They're instructed to plow the middle of the road, keep the middle of the road open, and as they make their way through the route, they're supposed to push back a little bit. If they try to clean a whole lane and then come back and do the lane again, generally they end up being in trouble and they can't keep up if it's a heavy snow. So they're instructed to plow the middle of the road.
I don't quite understand how all that works, but that's okay.
To keep the roads open as much as they can before they do their finished cleanup.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
I want to know more about their finished cleanup. What is that? Like, is that tidying up with a broom? Is that, like, what is the finished cleanup?
All right, Mr. Yannetti.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Trotta. Sir, Michael Proctor called you on February 3rd of 2022. Does that sound right?
Good morning, Thunder. We were talking about you earlier. I was trying to remember, and DSN, I don't know if DSN's here anymore. Gosh darn it. Because I was trying to remember what we had this morning. When remember we did a shout out to DSN because we were like, oh no, we don't know something. And then you were like, DSN would know. And anyway, but I don't know if he's here anymore. But I was like, oh, hopefully Fender will be here. But good morning and happy to see you again, my friend.
It may be, I'm not sure of the date.
It was within days of the big snowstorm, correct?
Yes.
You knew that he was investigating the death of John O'Keefe, which had occurred on January 29th, correct?
I did not know that.
Had you heard that there was a police officer who was found dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton?
Well, I knew, yes, I knew.
It was fairly big news at the
Yes.
time, correct? And were you aware that that was why Michael Proctor was calling you related to that investigation?
After he called and identified himself, he said that is why he was calling.
Of course. Now, you spoke with him over the phone only, correct?
Yes.
He never came down to the DPW to meet you in person, correct?
Not me, no.
And he never asked to interview any of your employees, correct?
We may have discussed who was on that route and who plowed, but I'm not sure at that time if he had told me he was going to go talk to anybody else.
Oh, so it's your testimony that you may have told him the identity of the plow driver when you spoke with him on February 3rd over the phone.
I may have, but I am not positive.
You don't have a memory of him asking you who the plow driver was?
I just love his tie with his shirt. I'm just still, can you guys, what are y'all's thoughts on the significance of this? So again, now here's, what is Yannetti getting at here? I mean, we know there's the whole thing about Frankenstein, but they're intending to call that witness themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this.
He asked, no, I don't have a memory of his exact questions.
But leaving aside the exact wording of his questions, it's fair to say you don't have a memory of him asking you who plowed Fairview Road on January 29th. Is that fair to say?
He asked me about, I believe he asked me about this plow list.
About the what? The plow list?
This plow list.
Right, but on the plow list, there's the name by the yard, correct?
Yes.
All right. There's also, to the left of that, an indication of the name of the plow driver, and it's just a first name and a last initial,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
It doesn't spell out the whole last name, does it?
No.
But you know the full last name, correct?
Yes.
You have a limited number of employees, right? It's not a 1,000-person company, right?
Yes.
All right. And you're well familiar that Brian L. is Brian Laughlin, right?
Yes. Okay, who's that?
As you sit here today,
Yeah,
do you have
probably.
any memory of whether the name Brian Laughlin was brought up
during that phone call with Michael Proctor?
I may have said to him that's who BL was, but I did I believe I referred him to the operations manager to double check who was on plowing that day.
Okay. You say you may have mentioned the name Brian L.
here,
or
like,
Brian
all day.
Laughlin, but again, I'm just trying to drill down on what your memory is. Do you have a memory one way or the other?
Yeah,
As to
so
whether
are we
the name
gonna
Brian
hear-
Laughlin came up in that
Shout out to
conversation?
Black Twitter. I wonder if we're going to hear more about this Brian Laughlin dude. I know, right? More Brians. I know, it's just a mess. Or if like they're going to bring him in on Cross or not on Cross. Sorry, their case in chief. I don't know. It's interesting. This is like another Brian, a whole other Brian.
If you ask
Whole new Brian.
me, do I,
Oh, I know. It's the best. He's my favorite person. I want him to adopt me. Just saying.
remember 100%? No.
Okay.
Just make sure he matches.
In
I
any
love it
case,
so much.
Trooper Proctor, Michael Proctor, never asked to speak with Brian Laughlin when he talked to you over the phone,
He
correct?
did not ask me, no.
I'm going to allow the question and answer.
And how short was that phone call with Michael Proctor?
If I tell you, you're going to ask me, how do I know for sure? I would say a few minutes, whatever a few minutes is.
I'm going to accept that answer. And you would agree with me that after, and you, by the way, you were trying to be helpful, correct?
Yes,
After that couple or 3-minute phone conversation, you'll agree with me that Michael Proctor never followed up again with you personally.
that's a good question. I am not sure.
Okay. Well, I'd like to direct your attention to about a week and a half later, specifically the date of February 14th of 2022, which maybe you don't remember the precise date, but around that time period, you came into work around that time period, and you learned that a defense investigator named Paul Mikowski had left his business card for you with somebody on the DPW staff, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently.
Yes.
I do not,
Sir, that means you don't answer that question. I think you can
Dude,
ask
never
me
testified in
the
court
appropriate
before.
one for you to answer, okay?
Love this dude.
Do you recall
Right?
when you
I
came
know.
into work
I know.
receiving a business card
Right?
from Paul Mikowski?
He's the best.
no.
Do you recall calling Paul Mikowski
And when
back?
he takes his stand, he like fluffs his tie. It's so cute.
No.
Do you recall speaking to any investigator from the defense at any point within a couple of weeks after you spoke to Trooper Proctor?
No.
Do you deny telling Paul Mikowski to call Bill Walsh?
Objection.
Who's
Sustained.
that?
Who is Bill Walsh?
Oh, great.
Billy Walsh is the operations manager for the,
The Highway Department supervisor?
yes.
Did the name Bill Walsh ever come up in your conversation with Michael Proctor back in on February 3rd?
Objection.
Did that name come up when you first spoke with Trooper Proctor?
Again, I believe I mentioned it, but I am not positive.
Is it fair to say that the Canton DPW has their own plowing and sanding trucks?
Yes.
Does one of them in particular have a nickname?
Frankenstein.
If they do, I don't know what they are.
Have you heard one of your trucks being called Frankenstein?
Objection.
Sustained.
You don't drive the trucks, correct?
No, I do not.
But Brian Laughlin does?
Yes, he does.
And Brian Laughlin was driving the truck that plowed Fairview on January 29th of
Yes.
2022?
Objection.
Sure. Can I approach
The witness or the sidebar?
the witness?
Yes.
Sorry. Do you have reading glasses as well? Or
Well, I have, yes, but
you're able to read the exhibit that you have in front of you?
yes.
Terrific. I'm handing you another document, sir, and I would ask if you would compare that document with the document you have in front of you and tell the jury if it's the same document or not.
It appears to be.
Does it appear to be identical?
Yes.
I will take the one back that does not have the exhibit sticker on it. Thank you, sir.
Now that was,
I have no further questions. Thank
you
you.
don't know yet what the point was of that. Like I remember that very specifically because Kieran like whispers to Yannetti for a second and then he does that last question with the document, but he doesn't ask him anything about it. So my guess is that's laying foundation for later on when they call Brian Laughlin to the stand on their during their case of chief. Like that's got to be what that is.
All right, Mr. Lally.
All right, now we have the
Thank
student.
you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Your
for the
ID
jury?
dude.
Louis Jutras, Jutras.
And where do you live, sir?
Stoughton, Massachusetts.
And how long?
Thunder, what did you have for breakfast today, if anything? Ha 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 ha, Lolly style.
Have you lived in Stoughton?
About 23 years.
And what is it that you do for work, sir?
I work for the town of Canton. I am the manager of the Information Systems Division of the Finance Department.
And how long have you been
I'm
doing
sorry,
that?
what was the last part?
Of the Finance Department.
Thank you.
And sir, how long have you held that position?
Almost 25 years.
Now, if you could explain to the jury just as far as your
Yeah,
job
it's
is
odd
concerned,
he's in charge
what
of
does
the.
that relate to, or what is it that you do as a director of informational service?
Sure. So my responsibilities are for the municipal departments and all the technology associated with that.
And does that include everything sort of from cell phones to GPS in town vehicles to security systems, things of that nature?
Yes.
Now, with reference to your department, how many people work in your department?
There's 3 of us in total, myself and 2 others.
So you essentially supervise the other 2 people as well?
Yes.
If I could turn your attention to around the time of January 29th, 2022, some point after that, did someone from law enforcement or from a police department reach out to you in regard to security cameras or camera systems within the town of Canton?
Yes, I received a notification from the Lieutenant Gallagher that there was a motor vehicle incident in town, that the state police would be looking for some video footage.
And so you received an initial notification from Lieutenant Gallagher telling you that the state police will be reaching out looking for video.
Correct.
And at some point shortly after that, did you receive any sort of, did anybody from the state police reach out?
Yes. Trooper Dunn reached out. We had a phone conversation. We had email correspondence relative to dates and times. We had pulled some footage from one site in Pequaside Farm that was put together. And then after that, there was a request for anything facing Washington Street, either from Town Hall or from the library.
And so as far as what was relayed to you by Trooper Dunn, what was sort of the description or what was it that you, were they asking just specifically timeframes, or did you get any other information as far as what you were looking for?
Lolly, compound.
From what I recall, there were 2 different timeframes, between 12 and 1, and then between 5 and 6. That was in our discussion and correspondence relative to Town Hall.
And just to be clear, that's from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. and then 5 a.m. to 6 a.m.?
Correct.
Now, as far as the Pequaside Farm, describe to the jury sort of what kind of location that is or what kind of town property it is and where it is in relation to the town.
Yes, so the physical area is off of Pleasant Street, which intersects with Washington Street, closest to Dedham Street and the police department. That's a large area, big white house, and we have cameras that, face the entrance, the street, and the surrounding building.
As far as the coverage from those cameras, have you had occasion on this occasion or prior occasions or subsequent occasions to look at?
So now I'm wondering if the footage, again, I didn't see all of it from today, but I feel like there was this little snippet from today where they were showing the footage, and I was like, saying how that wasn't actually the footage from the police department. I'm wondering if it was this dude's footage. I can't remember. But this might have been laying foundation for that.
View that the camera gets from Peckwood Side Farm.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
we have
wow.
a straight shot
What is-
down
what-
from the building, down the entrance driveway. Right.
What does one do at dawn? Does one turn into a pumpkin, or does one howl at the moon? What does typically at dawn things happen, right?
Right to the street.
We ride at dawn. Isn't that from something?
The other cameras that are around there's a couple of doorbell type cameras that physically focus on specific sections.
were
And
talking
then
about
other
that.
ones cover the general grounds around the building and the backside.
And sir, Mr. Jutras, is it fair to say that the Peakwood Side Farm cameras cover more of the property and less of the street out in front? Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, as far as that was the initial request was in regard to Peakwood Side, is that correct?
Correct.
And so the subsequent request, what was that in regard to?
That was for anything town hall or library that physically faced Washington Street.
And so the town hall and the library, sort of where are they situated in relation to each other and in relation to Washington Street?
Yep. So they
right.
physically abut.
Does the library ring a bell from back in the day, a million years ago in this trial? Do you guys remember anything significant about the library? Or sorry, let me say, what, if anything? Fender, right? I know. I miss the dad guy also. This dude, I don't know. We need to compliment him though, because we haven't done that yet. His glasses are kind of cool. Not John O'Keefe's house, somebody else's house is near the library. Well, it used to be before they moved. Yeah, I don't know. This guy's kind of, I mean, I don't know. He's honestly, what I will say is that, since I've already complimented him, I will say that I kind of found him to be very forgettable. And let me give you an example. Whenever I would be like reviewing the video footage and stuff to make these and like trying to remember how many witnesses we were on and stuff. And every time I would go through and like count the number of witnesses that had happened since Brian Higgins, because I always remember he was 43. I always forgot this dude. So that should tell you something. No offense to him. It's not like his fault, right? It's just, not the most interesting testimony. I understand, Candace. I understand. I totally understand. Good night. Thank you for being here. Thunder. I know. That's a good one. Oh, boy. Yeah, the Lally limit is real. It's real. It really is a real thing, y'all. You guys, if you had any idea how many hours a day I'm listening to freaking Lolly's voice, it's insanity. I hope I don't end up needing to be institutionalized after this trial.
On either side of Washington Street, right at the intersection of Sherman. They are diagonal to each other.
Now, as far as the cameras are concerned, particularly the exterior cameras that we're talking about as far as the library and the town hall, how are they sort of set up to record? Is it
So the library is right near where the McCabe's used to live. So remember, or not McCabe's, sorry, Colin Albert. So Chris Albert, Julie Albert, Colin Albert, and them. So remember, whenever they were talking about Colin Albert and he's at a friend's house and then Allie picks him up or whatever the fuck, they live. And then also we heard about that story about Chris walking home from work because he lived near the library. I still think that whole thing's bullshit. It's a whole other thing. I know. Yes, indeed. So that's another interesting factor. So if they've got cameras out there, it should be on camera. Allie McCabe should be on camera picking up fucking Colin Albert. Now, I'm sure that's not why the prosecution's called him, but they should have footage of that.
one continuous recording? Are they motion activated? How are they?
Yes, the cameras, based on size and so on, they are all set up for motion in pretty much all of our locations.
And as far as from your review of those cameras, is there any sort of indication on the footage as far as date and timestamp or anything like that?
Yes, we usually have it in one of the corners or someplace along when we have the video saved off and exported.
And when you were able to pull the video that the troopers were requesting, the date and timestamp affixed to those videos, was that accurate as to what the date and timestamp actually was at the time that it's recording?
Yes, I would believe so.
And sort of those date and timestamps, you know where they come from? Right.
The system is linked to a time server, which is remote and is used from the national standards.
Now, as far as the video is concerned from those, they're motion activated, but how far back do they go as far as how many days pass before, does it get sort of overwritten at some point?
Yes, depending on the site, most of them, because of the motion activated, because of, various request types and so on, and the number of the cameras, we usually try to get about 30 days. There are some that go longer because the site is or isn't used as much. And then there are other ones where, specifically with the library, they only requested to have a maximum of 30 days on that device.
And so when you received this request from the troopers, that was well within 30 days, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, because we're talking February 7th for the last request.
Now, as far as the video that you exported, well, let me ask you this. As far as when you were asked to retrieve that video, can you explain sort of mechanically the process of how you got that video and how you delivered that to the troopers?
Yeah, so specifically for the town and the library one, that.
So she testifies to dropping him off. Okay, so Allie testifies to picking him up from Fairview, 34 Fairview. That's what Allie testifies to. Colin testifies that she took him there and picked him up. So I don't know. Yeah. No, I believe it was Colin that testified to both. I have it written down in the other room. Colin, I believe, testified to both that she... I don't think Allie was asked actually if she brought him there. I remember we went through this. I don't think she was asked if she brought him there, only if she picked him up. And then he testified after her. And he testified that she dropped him off and picked him up at the house. So it's interesting, especially because we know she had that Life 360, and now we know there's all these surveillance cameras in the neighborhood. All this stuff should be knowable, right? All this should be knowable. We shouldn't have to be fucking guessing. Yeah, Colin.
Again, time frame provided.
Right, that's
using
right.
the manufacturer's software product. Doing
okay, yeah, that's right. And my memory is that, yeah, Allie testified to one thing and then Colin contradicted. Yeah, that's what I remember.
Search, picking the cameras that are facing the Washington Street side, and then having the time frame and exporting that out. That becomes, depending on the size of it, either a full executable that can just be opened and viewed, or a combination of files that has a player with it. And then based on the fact that we had already put videos together and that material was picked up, I had sent a file share link for that information.
You had sent that file share link to Trooper Dunn, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, as far as the video that you reviewed, were you sort of parsing, or were you looking for specific areas, or did you just sort of take the whole time period requested and send that off to the trooper?
As far as I recall, it was the whole time frame, just because we only have 2 cameras or so that physically cover the area in question, and he had 2 separate hours in question as well. So they were able to be exported and sent.
Now, as far as this
Good night, Black
particular
Widow. Love
video,
you.
this is video only,
See you
correct?
tomorrow,
There's no
my
audio
friend.
that's attached to these cameras?
Correct, no audio.
Now, sir, before
I think he said he did
we
not
get to
do it.
the camera footage specifically, I just want to ask you about another area.
Hmm?
In relation to, also within sort of the ambit of your duties and responsibilities would include GPS on town trucks, correct?
Yes, Public Works has a setup
Talent is adding
via
up.
their radios for GPS information.
And so with regard to that, specifically the DBW trucks, what, if any, information did you receive from anyone at the DBW in relation to those GPS devices within the trucks shortly after the snowstorm from the 28th and the 29th of January?
Yep. So on February 1st, I received notification from the operations manager that the GPS information was not working.
And so you received information after the snowstorm that it wasn't working during the snowstorm, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, taking you back to the Canton Public Library video that you provided to the trooper, were you told anything about sort of any type of vehicle or anything to be looking for within that particular video time frame that they were asking about?
Not that I recall.
Did you recall ever actually watching the video yourself as far as confirming sort of what it was?
Yes, I mean, I watched it from the time frame to see that we had information, watched it just to move forward to the end to make sure there was information and when the recording was physically available.
Just to make
But
sure
what was in it, no.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have the first video portion from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. Mr. Jutras, from what's up on the screen, you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
And as far as the view from this camera, this is from the library, is that correct?
Correct.
And so as far as what we're looking at here, this is the view from the camera as you observed it on the security camera and as you provided it.
Glad you're back.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sir.
this was the very last witness from week 5, which was just that one day. He was at the very end, right after the dude with the tie and the shirt that matched. So happy you're back, though. Multitasking is awesome, always.
Do you have is there a laser pointer up on the desk in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with this area as far as the area of Canton?
Yes, yes. Town Hall is right across the street.
And I'm sorry, I stepped right over your words when you were saying that.
Yeah, so Town Hall is right across the street, and the intersection here is at Sherman, and this is Washington, the longer street that you'll see.
So Washington sort of runs parallel with the street, and then Sherman is the street that appears to intersect with Washington.
Correct.
In the area of the town hall.
Yes, sir.
Again, sir, what's up on the screen? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
I like this.
Is this essentially the
I like
video
this
that you
view.
provided to the troopers or retrieved from the Canton Town Library from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. later on that day of January 29th?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And the orientation as far as Washington Street, Sherman Street, that's all the same in reference to the earlier. The camera hasn't moved.
Correct.
Thank you. So you can take that. Thank you very much, sir. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Shouldn't there be something that we see though? Like, wait. Were we supposed to see something? Hold on. What?
Troopers are retrieved from the Canton Town Library from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. later on that day of January 29th.
Yes, sir.
And the orientation as far as Washington Street, Sherman Street, that's all the same in reference to the earlier. The camera hasn't moved.
Correct.
Thank you. So you can
There's nothing happening. Was he just trying to show the snow? Maybe that's the point. I don't know. It's hard to why? Like, I have to quote Michael Scott here. There's an episode where he says something about how, like, something about like what the tiger is thinking, and then he's like, hold on, let me see if I can look up the quote exactly so I don't butcher it because it's amazing. The quote is perfection, and I don't want to ruin it. Hold on, guys. Okay, I got it. There's no way of let me quote it. Quote, there's no way of knowing what goes on inside the tiger's head. We don't have the technology. End quote. So that's like Lally. So we can swap that out with Lally. So there's no way of knowing what goes on inside Lally's head. We don't have the technology. But yet we still try. That's what I was gonna say.
Thank you very much, sir. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
I may proceed, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jutras.
Good afternoon, Attorney.
So confirming the state police, when they contacted you, asked for 2 hours of video footage, right? Between 12 and 1 a.m. on January 29th and between 5 and 6 a.m. on January 29th, correct?
Yes, sir.
You pulled that video footage, or at least arranged for it to be pulled for the state police, correct?
Yes.
And I believe your testimony was that you checked the beginning time and the ending time to make sure that you had the right time periods for those 2 hours, correct?
Yes.
But you did not sit down and watch 1 hour of snow falling and or cars driving by the public library, correct?
That is correct.
Didn't
I
do
did
that
not.
for between 12 and 1 or between 5 and 6.
Correct. I did not.
And at the time that you provided the video footage to the state police, did you know whether or not there was any missing footage within those 2 hours?
No. Because again, I did not play every single second of the video.
Understood. It's fair to say, and you're certain, that you did not cut out any of the video footage in those 2 time periods, correct?
Correct. It's motion activated. That's the only piece.
You provided the state police with the raw footage as it existed in your possession at that time, correct?
Yes.
And at that time, you knew that the raw footage was only saved for between 30 and 60 days?
That one is less than 30, yes.
Right. Now, as of early February, when you were dealing with the state police, you knew that Karen Reed had been arrested and charged in court, correct?
I do not recall if I had that information.
You knew that there had been a police officer found dead on the lawn of another police officer in Canton?
At that time in February, I believe so.
And that likely would have been discussed when the state police called you?
Nah, it would.
I do not recall the conversation other than asking for video footage for Washington Street.
And I'm sorry, sir, if you could just keep if I can't hear you, I guarantee you that these last jurors can't hear you. Could you just repeat that last question?
Again, when in the conversation with it, we had the dates and the timeframes.
Yelled at everybody except for him.
Anything else relative to it, I do not recall specifically the conversation.
Okay. So you don't have a memory of why you were being asked for this?
Correct. I know it was for a motor vehicle accident. Who and what, I do not recall if that was ever mentioned specifically.
Okay. And you would agree with me that as the IT director, you had the ability, if you wanted to download the footage onto some hard drive to preserve it, if you wanted to do that?
Yes.
Did any state trooper ever ask you to download and preserve that footage so that it would exist longer than that 30 to 60 day period?
That's a good question. That would have been a good thing to do.
And so it's fair to say you did not do that, correct?
Correct.
You complied with what they asked you to do.
Yes.
Now, skipping ahead to April 6th of 2023, you were contacted by Michael Proctor, a state trooper investigating this matter, correct?
I do not recall.
Do you recall Michael Proctor asking you to provide to the defense in this case the same raw footage you had previously provided to the state police?
No.
And you don't recall telling him that you couldn't do that because after 30 to 60 days, the footage is gone, correct?
I had a phone call with what I thought was Trooper Dunn asking for another copy of the data and telling him that I did not have it and I couldn't recreate.
Between him and the last witness, we've heard new names of troopers we had not heard before. Like, there's just so many fucking people. But also, this is really interesting. This is so now the point. Okay, who knows why Lally called this dude? But what we're learning from the defense, from what it sounds like, is there's footage that potentially was missing. from this surveillance that is showing, Washington Street, I guess it is, and like where the library is or whatever. And of course, Trooper Proctor's all up in this. Here, let me just rewind this just 1 second, because he's actually getting quite a bit of good information out of this witness, I feel like.
And you don't recall telling him that you couldn't do that because after 30 to 60 days, the footage is gone, correct?
I had a phone call with what I thought was Trooper Dunn asking for another copy of the data and telling him that I did not have it and I couldn't recreate it.
I see. Oh, so you assume
If it was Proctor, but no, I thought I was speaking with Trooper Dunn.
Trooper Dunn was the name that you remembered from February.
Correct. That was the first interaction I had.
And when they mentioned state police, you assumed it was the same state police trooper, correct?
Yes.
It's fair to say
Okay.
that once you shared the footage with the state police in February of 2022, you didn't control what they did with it after that, correct?
Correct.
And you have no personal knowledge about how they preserved it or didn't preserve it, correct?
I'll allow it. Do you have any idea?
No.
And one last question. You cannot testify about whether any video was removed from the footage after you provided it, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Nothing further. Thank you.
No redirect, Your Honor.
So essentially, the summary of that is like he never watched the entire thing, so nobody really knows what all was on that, right? Like the footage that was handed over, really, no one really knows 100% like what was on it. And then after 30 days, it goes away, and then he's not able to go back, and he didn't save it, even though he could have. And so nobody really knows if that's the complete footage. That's kind of seems to be the long and short of it. But I think that's the end of this one, guys. Let's see. I believe it is. Yep. There's the only fan. Cute. The snow squanguin. So what a day, you guys. This concludes week 5. Came in and out like a tornado. So I'm already working on week 6. So that first recap for week 6 will be on Friday. So tomorrow we have a half day in court, and I'll be there. And my thought is that Yuri will be on the stand probably that whole day. Again, it's just a half day, but because he's still on direct, which was my prediction whenever I had to go, he's still on direct. We'll have cross, redirect, and probably recross. So I'm really excited for that. But my guess is he might go through until lunch, and that's it for the day. So, and then no court Friday. But again, Friday we will have the recap for week 6. And potentially this weekend I might also do that review I've been talking about of the probable cause affidavit out in Idaho for BK. So that pretty much covers everything, y'all. I feel you guys with the Lally. It's hard. It's a struggle. But we'll get through it together, right? Squirrel crew for the support group here. So I appreciate y'all being here. I love all of you guys. Shout out to Rewatch crew, Replay crew. I'll have timestamps done shortly as always. And that reminds me, I need to do those as well for the live stream. Oh, and by the way, for anyone who missed it, I also had a video this morning come out on Becky Hill and her 74 new charges with the ethics committee. So do check that out too if you are following that, which is probably like everybody. And I'll see y'all tomorrow, and I'll go ahead and roll the outro.